Hello, I'm David and welcome to Change the System, a series of videos in which I talk about how to improve the world around us. Now I'm standing today next to a Parliament building that surely needs no introduction. And when this Parliament building was rebuilt in the Victorian century, they chose to build it in the style of an Old English church, a style that they hoped would show reverence for the assemblies that met inside. Today, it's fair to say that reverence doesn't exist. One poll a few years ago found that only 9% of Britons trusted their politicians to tell the truth. Britain is not alone. We are living a time of a global democratic crisis with the return of Donald Trump and record support for the far right in many rich and middle-income democracies. So we need to ask, what can we do? Because what's fueling the rise in support for the far right is this idea that's actually very left-wing, that we need to take power away from a political class and put it in the hands of the people. And we need to ask, how can we actually do that for real? So why are people getting fed up of politics? Is it the fault of the politicians? We often say it is. We often grumble about them being dishonest or out of touch, not representative, even corrupt. But I think we're too harsh on them as people. For example, if you look at what centre-left and centre-right politicians say in their speeches, most of the time they're not actually inventing the truth, they're just stretching and spinning it. And likewise, when you hear people saying politicians are corrupt, I don't think, in rich countries certainly, I don't think they're talking about bribery and kickbacks. What they really mean is they're conveying how they feel neglected and let down instead of represented. So I'd argue the real root of the problem is in the system. You see, the reason why politicians keep spinning the truth instead of telling it as it is because they're constantly having to sell themselves to us in order to win the next election. There are other problems with the system as well. Certainly here in Britain and in pretty much every other rich democracy, there's been a tendency to underrepresent women and overrepresent people from affluent backgrounds in national parliaments. Now, the system has had flaws like this for quite some time. So why are people getting so disgusted with politics now? In many ways it has got better. For example, there are now more women in Parliament, and in the age of the internet it's never been easier for politicians to find out what the public really thinks. I'd argue that there are 4 problems that are making things worse. Number 1, we're more exposed to politics. In previous decades it was something you might read about once a day in the paper or watch once a day on the news. In the internet age we hear about it far more often, and that means we hear about its failings more often. Number 2, increasing individualization of our lives. In everything from the TV we watch all the way through to our funerals, we want to personalize things to fit ourselves more. And politics is just not delivering us. The old system where you'd elect a few hundred people to meet in a building like this to rule over us is leaving us frustrated. Increasingly, we don't like being represented. 3, the rise of loneliness. Technology has changed how we live our lives, and it has made us more lonely over several decades. It has led to the erosion of the old social networks and meeting places like pubs here in Britain and the bowling leagues in America. On the other hand, it has created new ways to meet with people, but it tends to be people who have something in common, a shared identity or hobby. Loneliness has been linked to support for conspiracy theories and authoritarian leaders. 4, economic stagnation. After the recession of 2008, the high-powered economic growth of previous decades has not returned, and we're left without any real vision on what to do next and a decrease in economic security. So it's a combination of existing flaws of the system and those changes that are making people get increasingly fed up with politics. So what do we need to do? Well, I don't think this can be solved by just replacing, the ruling party or coalition with another. We need to think about how can we bring politics closer to the people? How can we make it more responsive? And there are 5 promising ideas we can look towards. Number 1, citizens' assemblies. This means selecting a random jury of citizens, although much bigger than a trial jury, and getting them to study an issue and debate how to solve it. And when a citizens' assembly comes to a decision, it can send a powerful message to politicians and the public that ordinary people, if they're given time to study and discuss an issue, they will want this. A great example of a citizens' assembly at work is in Ireland, where they helped break years of political deadlock over abortion. 2. Open neighbourhood assemblies. This is a bit like citizen assemblies and has much of the same advantages in how it can encourage constructive debate and problem solving. The difference is that instead of randomly selecting everyone, you would invite everyone in a neighbourhood to take part. And this could be a top-down scheme, like the idea of participatory budgeting, where you get these neighbourhood assemblies to debate and vote on what to spend money on. Or it can be a grassroots effort, something that is being done by the Humanity Project and Cooperation Hull here in Britain, and the Braver Angels workshops in America that are encouraging people to build bridges with those who have differing views.
3. Decentralization. Let's face it, a national government that rules over tens of millions of people or more is never going to please everyone at once, and that's going to be even harder to do in a society that is increasingly individualized. So we could give more power to local communities where politics can be more intimate and where there is a sense of social cohesion that you're just not going to get at a national level. 4. Fair voting systems. For countries like Britain that don't yet have one, proportional voting systems have numerous advantages. They produce parliaments that actually represent how people voted, compared to, say, Britain, where last summer one party won over 3/5 of the seats with just 1/3 of the vote. They allow more choice to voters. They get rid of the situation where so much campaigning is done in a small number of marginal seats. And on top of that, they increase the chance that a party will emerge that has the right answers. And that may make number 5 possible. 5. Post-partisan democracy. One thing that has long annoyed people about politics is they just get a sense that politicians keep putting the party interest above the national interest. On top of that, a common reason why politicians are seen as being dishonest is that they keep having to support and vote for policies that they don't personally support, but it's the party line. So we need to think about, could we do away with parties? Or, at least decentralize them, maybe make them more like a loose banner that like-minded candidates get elected under, a bit like the Teal independents in Australia. And I think this is possible in the long run, though not overnight. If all politicians were independents, it would make it very hard to pass something as routine as a budget. But coupled with something like, a citizens' assembly and more decentralization, it could be possible to build post-partisan democracy. And indeed, that's been going on in some places at a local level. Examples in Britain include Frome, Herefordshire, Uttlesford, where these sort of decentralized coalitions of independents have taken over local governments. Now, there is no silver bullet to solving this problem. There are not even 5 silver bullets. These are ideas that I think need to be discussed more widely. What we need to do is we need to debate in a way where we're not trashing the other side, but we're thinking about the system and how we can change it, how we can fix it and make politics more responsive to the people. It's going to take creative thinking, experimenting, even failure. And it's very easy to be cynical in this age. But here's the thing. When this building was built, only 1/5 of men and 0 women were able to vote. In the century after, the system was changed for better. That can happen again. Thank you very much for listening to this. Sorry if the editing is a bit jumpy. I'm not used to doing this sort of thing, and I kept being interrupted by things like passing traffic.